I've been at companies where people talk about like SEO content, like we're have to write SEO content. And it's like, no, like you have to write, you're producing content and SEO is one consideration, and it's one input. What people are searching for is an input, but it's not, you can't let the tail wag the dog when it comes to SEO.
Before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Ahrefs. Ahrefs provides you with an all-in-one SEO toolset that does everything from rank tracking to backlink analysis, keyword research, and technical audits. The best part, you can now use Ahrefs Webmaster Tools for free to identify and prioritize optimization opportunities for your website, see all the keywords that your web pages are ranking for, take a close look at the websites that link back to and refer you in their content, and analyze other websites to find out what drives their rankings. Visit ahrefs.com/AWT and sign up for free. And now, back to today's episode. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the SaaS SEO Show. I'm your host, George Hasiotis, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Dan Levy, a strategic storyteller based in Montreal. He currently serves as Director of Content and Corporate Messaging at ADA, the leader in automated brand interaction. Before that, Dan built and led editorial teams at a variety of SaaS companies, including Zendesk, Smooch, and Unbounce. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So as we do with every guest here at the SaaS SEO Show, I would like to hear, and I guess our audience as well would like to hear some things about you, your background, and what has brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So background in journalism. I did a master's degree in journalism in Boston and worked briefly as a reporter covering everything from Congress to presidential elections to I was in DC when the 2008 financial crisis hit. So doing kind of hard daily news reporting. Thought I might pursue that path, but that wasn't the best time to get into print journalism. The newspapers were kind of in the throes of collapse, and the new digital ecosystem that we all know today hadn't really sprouted yet. And so through a series of kind of serendipitous encounters, ended up working at a WPP agency that specialized in branded publications for luxury brands like Mercedes and Fairmont Hotels and a variety of airlines. And me being kind of the, I guess, token millennial at the time, they were in the midst of transforming themselves from a real print first kind of legacy agency to a digital content marketing agency, right? When that term was just being created, and they kind of looked at me, to help them do that quite unbelievably. And so I helped them launch their first blog, their first newsletter. Eventually, we had a podcast, and kind of created this sort of sub brand. That became what we called a multi-platform digital magazine, kind of covering this emerging world of content, media, and marketing. And so it was kind of meta. It was like a branded publication for a branded, content agency, all about content marketing. And so, kind of by covering the space and by practicing, quickly became, I guess, an expert in content strategy. Not long after journalism school.
Okay, what is it about journalists? Because we hear a lot about journalists running content teams. We are working with SaaS companies, and we happen to hear a lot about journalists running content teams at SaaS companies. And I'm curious, like, what is it about? What do you think? What would you say are the skills? Obviously, the ability to tell stories and things like that. But is it anything else that I'm missing that journalists have and that they are preferred, let's say?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. One is frankly just a market opportunity, right? Like I said, journalists who kind of like me, who began our careers kind of at the end of journalism or of traditional journalism, and at the beginning of this new kind of exciting content marketing world. But I think beyond this, the storytelling expertise that you talked about, one of the things that attracted me to journalism in the first place is that like just really interested in a lot of different things, right? This interdisciplinary kind of thinker. Even when I was in Washington, I was covering politics. I was also writing about culture and hockey and business, and so I think that kind of polymath sensibility lends itself well to content and marketing because I've been able to work for a variety of different companies in different industries and quickly kind of immerse myself in that world and learn the business and been able to kind of contribute without being necessarily an expert in anything. It's sort of your jack of all trades, expert in none, but I would guess say expert in one, which is storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess fast forward a few years, nowadays you run a content corporate messaging at Ada. For people who don't know, have never heard of Ada before, can you please share a couple of things about the company, and who is the typical customer of Ada?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, it's Ada. It's named after Ada Lovelace, who was the
Okay.
first computer programmer. Kind of a heritage we're really proud of. Ada is a Canadian technology company that helps brands automate their most valuable interactions with the people they care about, particularly their customers. And so at Ada, we really believe that in the not too distant future, every company is going to be an AI company. In the same way that these days, every company is in some ways a web company or a digital company. And we believe that automation transformation, if you will come primarily from the CX organization, from customer experience leaders, because there's a real opportunity there off the bat to automate a lot of those interactions, which happen hundreds, thousands of times a day. And that don't need to eat up the time of your most precious resources, which are your people, right? So we're helping companies automate those interactions. You know, First those sort of basic interactions and increasingly more complex interactions. To help the businesses save costs and drive revenue, and also to help the people who work for those businesses, work on more important kind of higher level things. And we've actually seen, and we could talk about this a little bit more, but we've actually seen, um, you know, automation and Ada in particular really not only have an impact on the brands, but on these people's careers and career paths, because automation is just opening up these new opportunities to have impact within a business.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. And I would like to get started and start with a very basic but very important question. What is your definition of content strategy? And according to you, based on your experiences working with all these great SaaS companies, what separates a successful content strategy from an unsuccessful one?
I guess it's maybe the journalist in me, but I start with the classic five W's and an H, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Starting really with why. Why are you creating content? What's the purpose? How does it connect back to your company strategy and your product strategy? So really understanding that, dissecting it, and documenting it. From there, what are you talking about? What are the topics? What's the scope of your kind of content brand, if you will? Of course, who are you writing for? Where what channels it's going to live on? When you're going to roll it out. So you're getting into the tactical level of editorial calendars and stuff like that. But it's really I think, like I said, wrestling with those issues, documenting them, so that there's a clear roadmap for everybody in your business to go and create stories and create content on behalf of your brand.
Do you think that this why that you mentioned, and I like this breakdown, by the way, but do you think that this why that you mentioned should somehow start from the top of the company? Like, should as like is as an element of a successful content strategy the buy-in from the executive team or the CEO, whatever. Do you think that this is the case? And on top of that, I one more question I would like to hear your thoughts on. Do you think that the executive team or the CEO or whoever should have an active role in constantly trying to answer that why?
Yes and no. So, like I said, I think your content strategy, especially that why component, needs to tie back, really closely to your overall corporate strategy, and your product strategy. If we're talking in the context of a SaaS business, so I think to some extent, as long as as a content strategist and a content team, you really become an expert, and I like to say that content producers and content strategists need to become experts in the business, and in the industry. As long as you've done that, then I don't think the C-suite team needs to have eyes on your strategy or yourself, or get into the documents, right? But I do think it needs to ladder up really closely. There are elements of a content strategy, depending on what your content strategy is, where I do think you need more buy-in, more involvement from the C-suite, and that's when there's an expectation that the content strategy is something that's owned and delivered upon across the organization, right? So a good example of this is Intercom, right? If you look at their blog, their content, it's produced almost entirely by subject matter experts within their organization, and I've spoken to folks in Intercom, so I know that this is the case. I know that's only possible because they have that buy-in from the highest level. That part of your job is to be thought leaders on the part of the organization, and that might mean carving out time in your sprint as a developer to write a blog post, right? That needs to be captured in the sprint. That can't just be an extracurricular activity. And so I think in order to really successfully execute on that type of content strategy, which is something that we are trying to do at Ada, because we think that one of our differentiators is our people, and really our deep expertise in AI, and in automated brand interaction, as we call it. In order for that to be successful, you need buy-in from the CEO on down.
I like that. I think that on a very practical level, it may be a bit difficult. How can you convince someone that this is something that there is the expectation that you will do that as well as part of everything else that you do on a daily basis? And I like the example that you shared.
So just to correct you there, I don't think you're convincing the employee, because I think if the opportunity is there, the people will put their hands up. It won't be everybody, but people who are interested will put their hands up. They sometimes need to convince their managers, right, to allow time for it and to create space for it, and that's where the buy-in is so important.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it makes sense, and I like that. I like that example. I think that Intercom is, if anything, is a great example of content strategy and good execution as well. I would like to discuss something that you already touched on a bit and mentioned, which is connected to Ada as well, which is corporate messaging and positioning. And as I asked about content strategy, I would like to know, based on your experience, what are the elements of a successful corporate messaging and positioning strategy?
Yeah, so I've been in content roles where I didn't own, or my team didn't own, corporate messaging and positioning, and I think that what I experienced in those situations was a gap. And that's no shade to product marketers who often kind of own that within an organization. Work with some amazing product marketers, including at Ada, working with one of the best product marketing teams I've ever worked with at Ada, and messaging and positioning is a true partnership with that team and other teams and stakeholders within the organization. But content creators, because maybe many of us are journalists, or maybe came from the agency world, or wherever path we took, we ended up here because our expertise is in storytelling, right? And to me, great messaging and positioning is storytelling at its heart, and so that's why I think it's really important for content strategists and content producers to have a seat at that table, and to be involved in not just telling the stories that stem from that messaging positioning, but helping to craft it, helping to actually wordsmith it, because this is where the actual words you're using are they're not just window dressing, they're actually crucial, right, to creating create a differentiated position, and messaging strategy. And so yeah, much like with the content strategy, like I believe that needs to just be really well documented. There's lots of different templates and frameworks that you could use, but at the basic level, it comes down again to like just articulating who the brand is, what they believe, so what is like that unique point of view, and who they're writing, who they're talking to. So all those, again, the five W's and the H, at a more sort of one level up. You're answering the same sorts of questions, and you're just kind of articulating that in a really succinct way, that's original, and clear, and really speaks to the problems that your brand and your product is solving. So it's sort of like a microcosm of your content strategy, that is something that everybody in the company should sort of understand and internalize, and that could use to go and either sell the product, right? That they could literally take it and copy and paste it word for word, or tweak it and use it in cold outreach emails. If you're a BDR, you could use it and stick it into an email if you're an email marketer. Put into decks and stuff like that. So it's really making sure that the way you talk about your company and what you do and why you exist is consistent, and clear, and and differentiated.
You mentioned the word consistent, which brings me to a follow-up question that I have about corporate messaging and positioning, which is how, especially when a brand grows, and when we are not talking about a brand like a company like Intercom, where you have people from inside the company who write the con. I would like to know, based on your experience, of course, and in your opinion, how do you like remain consistent, regarding your brand voice, when you have to work, for example, with and outsource some of the con creation to agencies, and how do you remain consistent both internally and externally, when you scale things up, for example, and you want to produce not 5 pieces of content per month, but 20, 30, and so on?
Consistency is something I talk about a lot. I think about it a lot, because not only is it a key part of my role, but it's actually a key part of the value of Ada, right? By automating your interactions, and you are going to be able to be way more consistent, right, than if you relied on just sort of individual human interactions and touch points to sort of speak on behalf of your brand, or to serve your customers. So consistency is really core, to what we do at Ada. In my role, it's kind of a boring answer, but it's more important than ever. Like, especially in a world where so many companies are either distributed globally or digital first, remote first, as Ada is, and that's just like really clear documentation first, right? So making sure that all this stuff that we've talked about, your messaging and your positioning, your content strategy, all that stuff is documented, somewhere clearly and succinctly, where everybody could find it. But then the second part of that, which is the tougher part, is socializing that, and enabling teams to go out there and use that messaging and positioning. We think about that a lot. We're always trying to get better at that. We definitely start from day one in an employee's journey. So, as part of our onboarding process at Ada, our messaging guide, our style guide, all that stuff is sort of socialized as part of that process. As training modules, or part of training modules as during employee onboarding. And then, sales enablement, of course, whenever we roll out something new, sales enablement is built into that process. So, when we're putting together a project plan or a brief for, let's say, a new content asset or a new campaign, we make sure that sales enablement is an important line item there, and that everything that we create and put out there, not only gets in front of our sales team, but that we have a mechanism for them to, be trained on it and to ask us questions, and also to give input, because often, they're on the front lines of talking to our customers and potential customers. So it's documentation in a way is easy, but something that a lot of companies just don't do well. The hard part to do well is the socialization and the enablement, and that's just something that you have to constantly work at.
Yeah, even for the documentation side, I had a discussion with a friend of mine the other day. He's pretty successful. He has an exit. He's in the SaaS industry. He's a mentor in so many different companies. And he told me, we were just chatting about and exchanging ideas on what content pieces we should publish after on our blog. And I asked him, and he told me, you know what, you should write a piece of content and give a template on content strategy. I'm telling you that people
Yeah.
don't really know what goes in a Google Slides, and I don't think that there's a right answer, but most people, I guess, would like to know and learn what goes into such a document, a Google Slides presentation or whatever, PDF, whatever. So I guess that these things have practical value as well, because for about all these things that we have discussed so far, people would love to know, like, okay, but what goes into that? I would like to have such a document, let's say, so that I can share with my team and vendors and whatever. Yeah, I would like to discuss something else, shift gears a bit. On Ada's website, you mentioned and have a dedicated page for the term brand interactions, which is something that I have never heard of, to be honest. And I would like to know, is that part of your strategy? And if yes, what do you want to achieve by, let's say, quote unquote, inventing and evangelizing such a term?
Yes. So, everybody's talking about customer experience these days, and CX, and we do as well, because it's CX leaders that we're ultimately marketing to. And like I said, we think the CX organization is going to be where this automation transformation begins. But an experience is really made up of individual interactions, right? And we think interactions are that kind of the atomic unit of the customer experience. Because every interaction somebody has with your brand is an opportunity to either drive loyalty or growth, or make a sale, make somebody's day and answer somebody's question, or it's an opportunity for all that to break down and for someone to walk away really frustrated. We've all had that experience, right? Of like being on live chat or something with our bank, and it's taking forever. You're in a queue. There's 14 people ahead of you in the queue, and then 3 people, and then all of a sudden there's 7 people ahead of you in the queue. Somehow, people jump the queue, I guess, digitally, and then you have to go, and the window closes, and then you have to start over again, right? So we've all come away like really frustrated by these interactions, and I guess we believe that has a real harmful impact on your brand, and so that's why at Ada we've built what we call a brand interaction platform that helps you manage and scale those interactions through automation, so that again those individual interactions could be consistent, could lead to some sort of resolution in the moment, but also those individual interactions could make up this a really great customer experience. So yeah, brand interactions is sort of how we think about the world. And we think it's something really important for every customer experience professional to think about, right? Like CX is a really grand term, right? We all want to create a great customer experience, but how do you do that? By really great individual interactions with your brand.
So it's the let's say the accumulation of all these brand interactions that make a consistent and cohesive, let's say, brand experience. And
That's exactly it.
you're just trying to use this phrase, let's say, as this term as a vehicle for expressing and explaining what you do and what you believe in.
That's right. Yeah, it's a way I think for people, CX professionals, to articulate the just fundamental role of a customer experience and of and of a CX leader within an organization, right? Connecting it to the brand, right? Some people might think of the brand as something fluffy or something for marketing agencies or CMOs to think about, but we really think even your customer support professionals, even the chatbot on your website, is an ambassador for your brand, and ultimately, that's something that everybody within the organization should be thinking about because, ultimately, you're not going to have a business if you don't have a strong brand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would like to take you back a bit and discuss something you mentioned in one of your tweets from 2021 about HubSpot's acquisition of The Hustle. And you
Right.
said, and I quote, that newsletters are the new podcasts. I would like to know, what you meant by that, and to hear a general comment on like your thoughts on SaaS companies acquiring, maintaining, and growing media outlets. Do you think that this is kind of the future for SaaS companies that obviously can do that?
I think there was maybe a little bit of snark in that tweet, as you do on Twitter, because I think that there is a trend of SaaS companies kind of looking at the latest trends in the greater media world, and sometimes not always kind of, sometimes a little bit late, right? Late to the party there. One of the things that I'm proud of, in my career, is like I said, in my very first role out of graduate school, back in 2008 2009, launching a newsletter, launching a podcast, experimenting with these new mediums, which I think is really important as a content marketer, as a marketer in general, right? Reach people where they are, right? So that's a sort of a fundamental tenet of marketing and of CX. And so if you're not kind of embracing and experimenting with these new channels, then you're missing an opportunity to interact, to bring it back to interactions. And so yes, I do think that, podcasts, in the same way that, it seemed like every SaaS brand was launching a podcast a few years ago. The acquisition of The Hustle by HubSpot made people kind of turn and notice the power of newsletters. But like, I think marketers knew the power of email, right? Like email, I think is just such a powerful channel for, almost any business. And I think that's sort of the art of it is linking these greater trends in the media world, to business value. And a newsletter is a great example of that because it's a great editorial medium, I think. One of the I think best things I ever created for a company was this really editorial newsletter that really covered the industry and built relationships with our customers and prospective customers. So you could really do that in a way that's kind of smart, that's engaging, that's entertaining, but there's a real business value in getting into people's email inboxes as well, and that's it's a sort of a perfect example of like content meets marketing, right? It's a great editorial channel, it's a great engagement channel, but it's also a great marketing channel. So I think SaaS, companies and content producers definitely should follow these sort of trends in media, and think about how they could leverage those new channels to serve their own businesses.
I agree with you, and I see this in general as I don't know, I wouldn't call it a trend or anything like that, but I see some cases of companies. uh, HubSpot's acquisition of The Hustle is just one. I remember that MailChimp, a few years ago, way before it has been acquired by Intuit, it launched a magazine, or it tried to integrate a magazine into MailChimp, I guess with the goal of like doing content more as a publication and not so much as a SaaS company, or
Hmm.
most recently SEMrush acquisition of Backlinko, which is a blog, for SEO and things like that. So I
Right.
don't know. I think that obviously not all SaaS companies can do that, but there must be some value in trying to do content as a publication, let's say.
Yeah, well, I think it also ties
As
back to our conversation about brand, right? Content has many purposes and can serve many goals within an organization. Um, but I think it is ultimately inextricably linked with brand, because brand people want to more and more people want to engage with and buy from brands that they trust. Um, that they trust as sort of like experts in their field, right? Even if they're Harry's Razors, right? They had an online magazine that was all about sort of like kind of men's lifestyle and stuff, right? So um, I think that content is just a really great way of building trust and also just demonstrating your expertise in a space, right? Because people want to buy from brands that they trust and they trust that they know what they're talking about, and so content is a great opportunity not just sell the product or the service, but to demonstrate their expertise and build credibility. And so I think content and brand are sort of two sides of the same coin, and you know there I think that there's been maybe a shift back to that sort of thinking. I think over the last 10 years with the growth of SEO and growth hacking and kind of these tactical elements of marketing and just better data, right? There's been a real in some cases an over what's the term, sort of overcorrected, right, for like the sins of like the early ad world, which was sort of all kind of just pure creative and not data driven. But the brand aspect of content and marketing is still so important, even if you can't measure everything as well. Although of course there are ways to measure brand and brand awareness. There's a real halo effect to having a great brand and to having content that's just really valued and engaged with on its own terms. And I think HubSpot really understands that,
yeah,
and I think the acquisition of The Hustle was just that. I mean, they're experts in inbound marketing. They're experts in business and technology, and The Hustle is just a great trusted source, for that sort of information that it's a millions. I don't know, hundreds of thousands of millions of people trust. Why wouldn't you want to attach your brand to that?
last
And
time I checked, I think it was 2 million or something like that.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy. And like
which is
if I'm gonna reverse engineer their thinking, I'm sure they were like, okay, we need to inquire The Hustle. Why? Because it's The Hustle, and we want HubSpot to be attached to it. And then they were like, oh, okay. Once we have people's email addresses, there's so many opportunities, right, to market and remarket and to market HubSpot resources and all that stuff. But I'm convinced that it started with somebody being like, I really love The Hustle. I want this to be part of HubSpot, and
that's
we'll
true.
we'll build a business case afterwards, right? It just made
Yeah,
intuitive sense.
yeah, that's true because the audience is too big and too engaged, I assume. You mentioned SEO, and I'm really curious to learn. Does a person like you with journalism background in journalism, do you care at all about SEO when it comes to content creation, or is it something that you don't, you're not really interested in?
So I think so SEO, like search engine optimization. I think I'm less interested in writing for search or creating content for search engines than I am in creating content for search audiences. I think that's the key distinction there, right? You're ultimately writing for people, and what better sort of signal of what people care about than like what they're actually going out there and searching for. And so I think as a content creator, whether you're a content marketer or a journalist, frankly, you'd be really really silly not to care about and research what people are searching for. But what they're searching for, like I think of it as sort of a clue, right? It's sort of a breadcrumb, um, and there's a lot of creativity that comes after that in thinking about, first of all, what are they actually looking for, right? What is that term? What is the intent, right, behind what they're searching for? And then how can we match that intent with content that serves our brand and serves our strategy, and kind of gets our unique take on that particular subject out there. And so I look at SEO like, I've been at companies where people talk about like SEO content, like we have to write SEO content. And it's like, no, like you have to write, you're producing content and SEO is one consideration, and it's one input. What people are searching for is an input, but it's not, you can't let the tail wag the dog when it comes to SEO. And I think as long as you have that mindset and you think of SEO as an important input, but not the be all end all, then it needs to be part of your strategy, but it can't drive your strategy.
I agree with you, and I liked what you said about creating content for a search audience. This is how we try to, let's say, promote it to our clients, to our prospects, to our audience even. The truth is, though, it's easier to say, even though I don't quite agree with the term, it's easier to say SEO con because either we like it or not, most people, they understand when you say SEO con, okay, this is what we're doing. It's a target keyword. We're going to optimize for it and so on and so forth. But I agree. I really agree with what you just said. It should be the right term, at least as I understand the term. And I'm not a native speaker, so I may be wrong, but it should be content for a search audience and not SEO content.
Completely agree.
So we are running out of time, and I have one last question for you. In your career, you've led editorial teams in some of the most popular SaaS companies like Zendesk and Unbounce. And I would like to know what are some of the key learnings that you took from these experiences?
There's so many. I think I've touched on a few of them already, so maybe like it's a good opportunity to recap. I think number one, content is inextricably linked to brand, and that also links to our SEO conversation. It's important to write content that'll rank for search audiences, but you can't do that at the expense of your brand, right? So you need to think about your brand voice, your unique point of view, and make sure that that's that comes through in that content, whether or not the origin of it was discovering a search term that you want to rank for or not. Number two, it's that content needs to start with the why and be intimately connected to your product and corporate strategy. And something that I guess I hadn't really gotten into before is just the importance of your team, and of building and developing a team that is empowered to do what it does best. And I think that's does connect back to our conversation about content plus corporate messaging, why those things are both in my title, and why I think that they're also inextricably linked, is because your content creators, your content producers and strategists are more often than not the best storytellers in your company, and probably always the best writers in your company. And so really important for content teams to have a seat at that table, when you're developing your messaging and your positioning, to help inform it, and also to help message it and massage it, and wordsmith it.
I don't think there is a better way to to wrap things up, and I agree with you on the third point that you make. We often forget how important content writing is, and the fact that something that goes out there, it may be, I don't know, SEO content, but at the end of the day it represents your brand. So we should be more thoughtful about that, and I agree with you that con marketers, con writers, people from con teams should have a sit at the table and share their inputs and part of the story. That was all very insightful and something that many things that we have not discussed here at the SaaS SEO Show. So thank you very much for that, Dan. Last question I have for you: where can people find out more and get in touch?
Sure. So first of all, ada.cx. Check out what Ada does. I think it's really have a unique platform and a unique team building it that are kind of true experts in AI and automation and how these things are really going to transform business across every industry going forward. And then from there, obviously, you can see all the great stuff that my team creates, which is really anything written that goes out into the world on behalf of Ada goes through my team. And I just have a really great team that I'm obviously very proud of. And then personally, danjlevy.com. If you're interested in a little bit more about my background and my philosophy on content and strategic storytelling. And from there, of course, you could find me on Twitter and all the social channels, and feel free to even drop me a message. Would love to know that you're listening and this was helpful, or if you disagree with something that I said, feel free to ping me about that too. I'd love to hash it out.
We will drop all these links in the show notes. Dan, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Before you go, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Ahrefs. Ahrefs provides you with an all-in-one SEO toolset that does everything from rank tracking to backlink analysis, keyword research, and technical audits. The best part, you can now use Ahrefs Webmaster Tools for free to identify and prioritize optimization opportunities for your website, see all the keywords that your web pages are ranking for, take a close look at the websites that link back to and refer you in their content, and analyze other websites to find out what drives their rankings. Visit ahrefs.com/AWT and sign up for free.